Welcome to Cross Life, Prophecy in the News. As we look at Bible prophecy's connection to current world events, and as we navigate through uncertain times, we explore prophetic passages of the Bible and how they relate to our lives today. This is about our future, preparing for the Great Tribulation just ahead. We'll get into the major prophecies of the month in just a moment. First of all, a little discussion time. Yes, and because I'm sharing with you one of my wisdom nuggets, this will be a direct quote from that grand old sage Rick Brinegar. What is your most important survival item, class?
My Bible.
Anybody vote for Bible? Anything else?
And my, what they call that, life straw, where you can stick it in any body of water and drink water out of it, and it purifies it.
The other idea is your most important survival item. The most important survival tool, according to that wise old sage that we talked about, is often considered to be your brain and its ability to remain calm and think clearly. This allows you to assess the situation, prioritize needs, and make informed decisions. 3 critical steps that will save your life in any disaster. This comes from Goshen Prepper's website. Learn how to build a rock-solid survival plan, identify life-threatening risks, and take fast, effective action when every second counts. The 3 steps he's going to mention in the video clip just ahead are the 3 important things. Secure your immediate environment. Account for all the people in your group. Secure your supplies.
Number one, you need to secure your immediate environment when something happens. We're talking about man-made disaster, natural disaster, crap hits the fan. All of this fits in this scenario. Structural damage, threats, check for other danger. This is so vitally important because people think, oh, wow, look at that happen. They don't look around, and next thing you know, other things are coming into play because it's like a domino effect, and down they go. I want you to understand that most people will die from a major airline crash, but almost half survive and often will die from smoke inhalation and fumes and fire because they can't escape. That's really interesting food for thought, isn't it? Because we think they all die, but that's not the case at all. They don't check their surroundings. They're like, oh, look, I'm stuck in this airplane seat. I should get out. And they end up dying. All right. I was an EMT for 10 years before becoming a doctor. And I loved it, by the way. Just I don't know, I'm kind of like one of those junkie kind of people. I love, major, quick thinking, trauma type stuff. And that's why I went into the ER later. But I always stressed, and I was always stressed, by the way, that when you get on scene, the first thing you need to do is you need to survey the scene. Because even as an ambulance jockey, head to a scene, you think, oh, everything's going to be fine. I want to take care of this. But when I was in Kansas City in med school, I wasn't on the ambulance at this time anymore, but there was an ambulance situation there where they were called to a house explosion. Of course, house explosion sometimes is a meth lab, and that's exactly what was happening. And so when the ambulance gets there, they're the first one on scene. This is back before the day the police would arrive with them. The meth head inside wanted to protect his stuff, so he shot and killed a few of the people from the ambulance coming over. You always have to assess the scene. You have no idea what's going on. In these situations, it literally will, people will act crazy, and you'll actually see, like, again, structural damage. Anything could actually cause further trauma. We don't think of that, but you need to. And you need to practice that and get that mindset. Don't just run in. You need to look around. But the problem is, when you get into that fight or flight situation, you really get hyper-focused. You always want to have that tunnel vision, or you will have that tunnel vision, and therefore you won't see what's around you. And that's why in military we do flanking procedures and techniques, because people don't see the sides coming. All right, number 2. As soon as it happens and once everything's safe, you need to gather and account for all the people in your group. We're typically talking about family, right? But obviously it doesn't have to be family. Maybe you have a prepper group that you guys all keep in contact with. You need to account for everybody. But it's not simply just doing head count. Yeah, we're all here. You need to assess any type of medical conditions. This doesn't necessarily have to mean physical, but mental or psychological too. Because people get so much in shock, they don't know what's going on. They'll need you to guide them through the situation. But obviously medical can save your life. You need to look at everything that's happening right then and there, because understand that the first few seconds, the first few minutes of some of these major medical traumas will be the most life-threatening. So be able to handle that very quickly. And again, this is where training comes in. I intend on making more videos, by the way, in helping you out medically speaking through what to do in these situations. But in the very least, take an EMT course. They're relatively inexpensive, and it's all of those very quick emergency things you need to take care of. But understand that it doesn't matter if it's a natural disaster or if there's marauders. These events are very distressing, very confusing. And if you haven't trained for this, then your brain will go fuzzy and you won't know what to do or act, and you'll just kind of freeze. So make sure you check everybody medically and go from there. All right. Lastly, you need to lock down your supply. So something's happened. Could be a natural disaster, a tornado, could be a hurricane called Katrina. It could be crap hits the fan. It could be war. I mean, there's so many things. After you take care of everybody, everybody's there, we're good to go. I'm now in a situation where I'm not in danger. Everybody's medically treated. You need to now take care of your gear. Even more so, kind of like this, lock down your supplies. Right now in your house, you probably have a whole bunch of your food stockpiled over here, and maybe you have some weapons over here. It's time to take care of those, because now you're in a situation, and this one actually is not right away, but you have a little bit of time. It's now time to act quickly. You have a couple days, 3 days, I estimate, before things start getting more problematic, if you want to put it that way, because once they start hitting 9 meals, then anarchy sets in. So time to lock down your supplies, put things in different areas. You want to make sure you put certain things hidden away. You want to make sure you're not looked at as being a prepper, etc. We've talked about this many times. So 3 major things right now. So time to take action, because when this does happen, it's not if, but when this does happen, disaster will strike. It strikes all the time as it is. And right now things seem to be getting a little bit more crazy as time goes on. I think you agree with this. You need to take care of it now, because when that time does happen, you're not going to remember these things. You're going to completely blank and have no idea what's going on. So that's why having a plan, writing these things down, watching this video a few times, watch this video with your prepper group or your friends or family, and start tangibly writing down a plan and practice it. It sounds corny or hokey. And even as you're doing through it, you're like, this is kind of weird, we're practicing this. But if you don't practice this, you may literally, after the fact, survive and say, oh, I really wish I should have written down those 3 steps, because these 3 steps are the most life-saving steps. They're the most vital. And unless you practice it now, you will not be able to act accordingly. And literally, it very well may take your life or the life of your group, friends, and family.
Now I know that in the Great Tribulation, just ahead, there will be disasters, and you'll be going through some disasters. But the thing that's good about going through these disasters with the Lord is that He promises to take you through. And then in Joel chapter 2 it says, He'll give you beauty for ashes, oil of joy for mourning, and the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness.
Why Pentecost is important. Pentecost is how Jesus, by his Spirit, prepared the people of Israel to announce good news to the nations. Jews from all over the world were all hearing the disciples speaking in their own native dialects. Peter addressed the crowd and began explaining what was happening. The arrival of the Holy Spirit was the fulfillment of a prophecy in Joel chapter 2.
As the apostles gathered for the Feast of Weeks, 50 days after the Lord's resurrection, they, like ancient Israel, had now been prepared to receive the fullness of the law. The events that occurred on the day of Pentecost are reminiscent of the events commemorated on Shavuot. Like the Israelites gathering at Mount Sinai, the people gathered in Jerusalem at the temple, built atop Mount Moriah, to be instructed of the Lord. When the Jews saw the cloven tongues of fire, they must have wondered if the Shekinah had returned, except instead of the fire resting upon Mount Sinai, the fire is now resting on the apostles. After hearing the fervent testimony of Peter of the risen Savior, the gathered Jews asked what they must do. Peter told them, "Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the remission of sins, and ye shall receive the gift of the Holy Ghost."
When Peter explained to the crowd what was going on, he began by saying, "But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel." But this is that which was spoken by the prophet. When Peter began to explain to the crowd what was happening, he was able to pinpoint exactly which Bible prophecy passage applied to what was going on around them. We'll be able to do the same during the Great Tribulation. When people are perplexed and confused, we'll be able to say, "But this is that which was spoken by the prophet." "And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many." When we're brought to the police station, or to the courthouse, or before military tribunals, we know our God and will be able to instruct many. The popular Thief in the Night book and movie series was based loosely on a phrase from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. "For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night." But they left out the rest of the passage. "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief." 1 Thessalonians 5:4.
This final 7-year timeline begins with the Mideast peace agreement and ends when Jesus returns as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It begins with the Mideast peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. During the first 3.5 years of the final 7 years, the third temple was built. Sacrifices are resumed. Then the Antichrist puts an end to the sacrifice and the oblation, and he stands up in the temple to receive worship. This we call the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that makes desolate. Because of a war between Satan and his angels, his demons, and the angels of God, Satan's banished from appearing before God's throne. About this time, the false prophet comes alongside the Antichrist to be his assistant and to reach people through their religion. The Antichrist gains control. He gains control and consolidates his power and begins to eliminate his enemies. The mark of the beast is fully implemented. This is during the last 3.5 years, the final 7 years. At the second coming, the Antichrist is defeated. And the kingdom of God is established forever.
On our final 7-year timeline, let's begin with the peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians.
A bold Mideast peace agreement, not a peace agreement, but peace initiatives in Saudi Arabia. Syria's new leader was urged by Trump to join the Abraham Accords. U.S. sanctions on Syria were lifted. Trump signed a economic deals with Saudi Arabia valued at over $600 billion. The Saudi Crown Prince was urged to recognize Israel, and it was Trump's fervent hope that Saudi Arabia would join the Abraham Accords.
One day after announcing he's lifting sanctions on the country. The move came amidst a flurry of other activity Tuesday when the president signed a deal worth hundreds of billions of dollars with the Saudi kingdom, encouraged the crown prince to recognize Israel, and issued a new warning to Iran. The deals with Saudi Arabia amount to about $600 billion, including a $142 billion arms agreement. At the Saudi Investor Conference, President Trump said he hopes Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords.
It's my fervent hope, wish, and even my dream that Saudi Arabia, a place I have such respect for, especially over the last fairly short period of time, what you've been able to do, but will soon be joining the Abraham Accords. But it will be a special day in the Middle East with the whole world watching when Saudi Arabia joins us, and you'll be greatly honoring me, and you'll be greatly honoring all of those people that have fought so hard for the Middle East, and I really think it's going to be.
Trump will bring biblical Middle East peace, U.S. ambassador tells the Washington Post. The U.S. ambassador from the United States to Israel is Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee says that the shared Judeo-Christian values are very important for Christians, that he is guided by faith and focuses on unity, not politics. He supports Israel's control over all of its land, including the West Bank. He hopes to use his position to promote peace and help the world better understand Israel's spiritual and moral value. nuclear rivals, India and Pakistan. They have a ceasefire deal. India-Pakistan ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States is holding, but threats by both nations persist. The tension comes after a terrorist attack in the Kashmir region of India.
As just hours after the two sides agreed to a ceasefire on Saturday, explosions reportedly rang out in some border cities and towns. Artillery fire and attack drones, they were seen in Jammu and Kashmir, the center of much of the fighting, and some of the cities were also under blackout. Now, India accuses Pakistan of violating that pact, while the Foreign Ministry of Pakistan said the country was committed to the ceasefire. Now, things did seem to calm down by Saturday afternoon our time. For the last 36 hours or so, it's been quiet on both sides of the border. Now, this morning,
Israel anxious, Trump visits the Middle East. The world's most explosive region is on the brink. Hamas frees U.S. hostage Eden Alexander. I assume this means he's the final remaining American hostage. Indirect U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations. Trump is frustrated with the slowness of the Gaza operations. And Qatar is revealed to be a terror financier and a Hamas supporter.
Sure to subscribe, and let's dig into this. Okay, we've got Qatar is another story entirely. Trump is visiting Qatar, and they have been a backer of Hamas. There's no other way to say it. And many consider Qatar a state sponsor of terrorism. Let's get that out of the way. But that's one of the stops on this itinerary. There have been rumblings as well about a Palestinian state. Will Trump announce that he's recognizing a Palestinian state? Some have put that forward. Now, my friend, the brand new U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, has said, no way, that's not happening. A lot of this, folks, we want to cut through the noise here today because a lot of this seems to be the mainstream media, not only the MSM here in the United States, where I'm sitting right now, but in Israel, where they also have a left-wing press. A lot of it seems to be them up to their devious tricks, the mainstream media, trying to pit Bibi and Trump against each other, trying to pit Israel and the United States against each other. Another good friend of mine, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, David Friedman, called it fake news on X just today. He said, this is fake news. So it's coming out like a fire hose, right? All over the place. Today alone, before I joined you here, I just got off the set of the Stacklebeck Tonight show, which you see behind me for TBN. And we also, by the way, have a YouTube channel, a Stacklebeck Tonight YouTube channel that you can subscribe to with clips from my nightly TBN show. Check that out. I think it's at Stacklebeck Tonight here on YouTube. If you love what you're hearing on the main channel here, you will also love the Stacklebeck Tonight channel. Clips from excellent guests on a nightly basis. But
Trump presses for nuclear deal. A top Iranian official is responding to President Trump's new message to Iran. Trump says Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but that he is open to negotiating a nuclear deal.
President Trump today seemed confident he'll reach a nuclear deal with Iran.
And I have a feeling it's going to work out.
After warning there's a time window for Iran that's closing.
But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure.
Iranians appear to overwhelmingly want a deal.
Trump mediates Russia-Ukraine ceasefire. Trump says Russia-Ukraine ceasefire talks to begin immediately after a call with Putin.
Breaking right now, President Trump has spoken with Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in separate phone calls today. Trump says Russia and Ukraine will immediately start ceasefire negotiations after an excellent call with Putin. Ahead of the call, Vice President J.D. Vance said Trump is more than open to walking away from trying to end the war if he feels Putin isn't serious about negotiations.
Next, on our final 7-year timeline, World War III.
Someone like to read this major prophecy of
The four countries which house the Euphrates River. Of the four angels of the Euphrates River war prophecy. Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Increased hostilities in any of these four countries may indicate a World War III significance.
Did Trump threaten Israel? The Washington Post reported an anonymous source that said Trump's people are letting Israel know we will abandon you if you do not end this war. That's the only news source that said anything about this threat to abandon Israel.
Well, we're working very hard on Gaza, and Gaza's been a territory of death and destruction for many years. And, you know, I have concepts for Gaza that I think are very good. Make it a freedom zone. Let the United States get involved and make it just a freedom zone. Have a real freedom zone. Because it seems that Gaza, every time, you know, every 10 years it happens and more than that, it really happens all throughout. They've never solved the Gaza problem. And if you look at it, I have aerial shots where, I mean, there's practically no building standing. There's no building. People are living under the rubble of buildings that collapsed, which is not acceptable. It's tremendous death. And I want to see that be a freedom zone. And if it's necessary, I think I'd be proud to have the United States have it, take it, make it a freedom zone, let some good things happen, put people in homes where they can be safe, and Hamas is going to have to be dealt with.
60 killed. Israel targets Hamas's Sinwar. This is the brother of the other Sinwar that was assassinated by Israeli Defense Force. This is Mohammed Sinwar. The other one was called Yahya Sinwar, the one that's already been killed. Israel's airstrikes on the European hospital in Khan Yunis targeted Mohammed Sinwar, Hamas's de facto leader, after his brother Yahya Sinwar was reportedly killed last year. Israeli Defense Force claims Sinwar was operating from a Hamas command center beneath the European hospital in southern Gaza. Closed-circuit TV footage has captured the moment of the Israeli airstrike. So I loaded up a video clip that doesn't show the gruesome parts, but I saw the one that has the gruesome parts, and it's a precision strike, a precision strike next to the hospital building. Not the hospital building itself, but they wanted to get to the basement, to the underground facility. And this particular one that's more gruesome is showing some people standing outside or sitting outside the hospital, and apparently, well, anyway, it's just gruesome.
Shocking CCTV footage has captured the moment an Israeli airstrike hit the European hospital near Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Parts of the video are too graphic to show. The strike, which happened on Tuesday, killed at least 28 people, according to local officials. The Israeli military claims it was a precise strike on Hamas operatives using a command center underneath the hospital, but no evidence has been made public to back this up. Just hours earlier, another hospital in Khan Yunis, Nasser Hospital, was also hit by an Israeli strike.
Well, they were aiming for the underground tunnels, and they have the technology to pinpoint bodies or human beings in those tunnels, and they were after Abraham Sinwar.
It was a very violent night, particularly in the north of the territory with more than 50 people killed in Israeli airstrikes. We've seen images of people searching through the rubble of collapsed buildings, retrieving bodies of people who were killed. Doctors are saying that children are among the victims. And you mentioned the attack that happened in Khan Yunis. 28 people were killed in the attack that happened yesterday in the south of the territory. Now, this happens as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing to expand the military offensive against Hamas in Gaza. He says that it is this kind of pressure that is going to force Hamas to negotiate a deal for the release of the hostages who remain in captivity in Gaza. This is a very controversial strategy. It is facing growing opposition in Israel. Even the Trump administration is frustrated with the Prime Minister. For a very long time, he's been accused of not being interested in reaching a deal with Hamas, of prolonging the war for political purposes. So we're now seeing these attacks.
Gideon's chariots launched in hopes of freeing hostages. Israel has begun its new campaign to strike Hamas across wider areas of the Gaza Strip and permanently remove the terror group's power.
On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the new military campaign.
As we promised, we have launched a powerful campaign against Hamas, Gideon's chariots. IDF forces are simply entering with force into the Gaza Strip with a dual goal: defeating Hamas and freeing our hostages.
While the air and ground operation begins, Israel announced it's also pursuing every opportunity to reach an agreement to release all of the hostages. One deal under consideration by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff would include a temporary ceasefire, release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners, then followed by more negotiations to end the war.
Houthis surrender after crippling attacks. Iran suffers explosive setbacks. Missile strike near Ben Gurion Airport. Israeli retaliation airstrikes in Yemen. Trump announces U.S. Houthis ceasefire. Continued IDF attacks in Gaza and Lebanon.
Israel's response to the Houthi ballistic missile attack on the Ben Gurion International Airport was swift and dramatic, with Sana'a International Airport in Yemen that is used by the Houthis to import weapons and export terrorists completely destroyed by an Israeli counterstrike. Houthi sources are claiming dozens of casualties in the strike amidst reports of panic in the streets of Yemen. This was the second Israeli strike on the Houthis in 24 hours, and we'll have the list of the targets that Israel hit in both of these strikes. However, there was another surprise on Tuesday evening for both Yemen and Israel as United States President Donald Trump announced that the United States campaign of airstrikes against the Houthis has come to an end. This is as the Houthis no longer pose a threat to international shipping, according to the United States President. The announcement came just a few hours before Israeli jets hit the airport in Sana'a, and Israeli officials expressed surprise and dismay. However, another statement emerged from Jerusalem saying that if the Houthis do not fire, then Israel will not respond.
Finland prepares for the worst. Satellite imagery reveals extensive military infrastructure development along Finland's border with Russia, as Russia positions troops, constructs new facilities, and reactivates military bases. This happened after Finland joined North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Russia has just made a worrying advance towards Finland's borders, making clear preparations for a confrontation with NATO. This comes as satellite imagery confirms significant Russian military construction near Finland's recently fortified border. NATO officials verified images showing new troop camps, storage facilities, and reactivated air bases across northwestern Russia, a direct response to Finland joining the alliance. The Institute for the Study of War determined Russia is likely preparing for future aggression against NATO by expanding military presence along both Finnish and Estonian borders. But there's more to this buildup than just a few temporary installations. At the Kamenka base in Leningrad region, just 65 kilometers from Finland, over 130 tents capable of housing up to 2,000 personnel have appeared at this previously inactive military site.
Next along our final 7 years timeline, famines, pestilences, earthquakes.
From The Guardian, a case study in groupthink. Were liberals wrong about the pandemic? We called them lockdown liberals. That may be my term. I don't know. Or maybe I heard it somewhere. Lockdown liberals were wrong. Groupthink. The aggressive outbreak policies. And you notice I don't say the P word or the V word or the C word. Instead I say outbreak or something else. I don't know if that would get me in trouble to say mask mandates. We'll see. Mask mandates. And we'll see what happens. Gain-of-function research banned. Trump signs executive order to crack down on gain-of-function research, which means genetically manipulating pathogens to enhance their deadliness or lethality.
Tell the Speaker. We have a number of executive orders for your attention today, sir. The first relates to gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is a type of biomedical research where pathogens are adulterated, viruses are adulterated to make them more potent or to change the way that they function. Many people believe that gain-of-function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic that struck us in the last decade. What this executive order does, first of all, it provides powerful new tools to enforce the ban on federal funding for gain-of-function research abroad. It also strengthens other oversight mechanisms related to that issue and creates an overarching strategy to ensure that biomedical research in general is being conducted safely and in a way that ultimately protects human health more.
It's a big deal. It could have been that we wouldn't have had the problem we had. Right?
A lot of people say that, sir.
If we had this done.
Lockdowns, more harm than good. Journalist David Zweig on why school closures during the outbreak may have done more harm than good. Decision makers ignored real-world evidence and instead went along with what was politically correct at the time.
One of the reasons I think my book is being received really well is that I approach the topic apolitically. And that's how I was able to publish a lot of these articles that both challenged the establishment position, but I did it from within establishment media. And unfortunately, because our culture and our country is so politically acrimonious and divided, what we find is that, and what I talk about in the book at length, is that much of the response led by our public health establishment, aided by the media, was very politically motivated. And I can give you two quick examples on this. And because of this, this kept millions of healthy children out of school, including kids didn't step foot in a classroom for more than a year, healthy children, while at the same time adults down the street could be having a glass of wine.
It was wild. Yeah, there's the loss of access to learning, but also you're kept in an environment that's sometimes dangerous for kids when they're not at school.
That's right. Child abuse skyrocketed. You have a kid who's kept home with a monster. Why? Because teachers and educators are the first line of defense who can see when abuse is happening. That was taken away from them.
So why did it happen? Because the American Academy of Pediatrics, as you point out in your book, recommended a swift reopening of schools very early, and it was happening in Europe.
They did, and so the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, came out with guidance. They basically said, no matter what, let's get kids in school. It's so important. They're at basically zero risk. They're not going to be super spreaders. And don't even worry about 6 feet of distancing. If you can 3 feet, that's fine. Just get them into the classroom. Shortly thereafter, Donald Trump tweeted in all caps, open the schools in the fall with a bunch of exclamation points. Immediately after, the AAP reversed its guidance. Gone was the idea of
WHO outbreak treaty. You notice I didn't say the P word, okay? But you know which treaty I'm talking about. The World Health Organization treaty passes. What treaty? The treaty. It's the other word for an outbreak, and it starts with a P. You're not supposed to say that. According to improve preparedness for future outbreaks following disjointed global response to the C outbreak, also known as something else, but the absence of the United States cast doubt on its effectiveness.
The World Health Organization adopted its first international pandemic agreement during the 78th World Health Assembly in Geneva on Tuesday to bolster global cooperation in preventing and responding to future pandemics. The agreement outlines measures to enhance surveillance and ensure equitable access to vaccines and treatments following the uncoordinated global response to COVID-19.
but they are going broke. The United States had been contributing $500 million a year.
Continuing along our final 7 years timeline, Mark of the Beast.
AI pioneer. World is not prepared for what's coming. Geoffrey Hinton, whose work shaped modern artificial intelligence, says companies are moving too fast without enough focus on safety. He says, this is the guy that practically invented artificial intelligence. He says there's a 10% risk that AI will take over.
In 1986, he proposed using a neural network to predict the next word in a sequence, the foundational concept that today's large language models
It's an expert at everything.
Have built upon.
You believe then that we would get here?
Yes, but not this soon.
Because that was 40 years.
I didn't think we'd get here in only 40 years.
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, I didn't believe we'd get here.
Yeah, it happened fast.
Yeah.
That speed, Hinton says, means education and medicine will soon be transformed. Climate change could be solved. But mostly, the rapid progress really worries him.
The best way to understand it emotionally is we're like somebody who has this really cute tiger cub. It's just such a cute tiger cub. Unless you can be very sure that it's not going to want to kill you when it's grown up, you should worry. I'm kind of glad I'm 77.
Hinton predicts AI will make authoritarians more oppressive and hackers more effective. He now spreads his money across 3 banks. The exact odds of an AI apocalypse are unknowable, he says, but hazards this guess: a 10 to 20% risk AI will take over from humans.
People haven't got it yet. Yeah. People haven't understood what's coming. I don't think there's a way of stopping it to take control if it wants to. The issue is, can we design it in such a way that it never wants to take control, that it's always benevolent?
Iris scanning orb verifies ID. The World app, which is invented by the inventor of OpenAI ChatGPT, the app verifies that someone is a human by taking a photo and an eye scan.
It's stepping into the future.
This is the orb. It looks very cool, but it's basically just a fancy camera that's able to look at you and tell whether you're a real human or not.
You heard that right. In a world of deepfakes and online bots snagging the best deals, this shiny chromed white ball or camera could help prove that you're a human. That's the concept behind World, an open infrastructure co-founded by Sam Altman of OpenAI and architect of ChatGPT.
We wanted a way to make sure that humans stayed special and central in a world where the internet was going to have lots of AI-driven content.
Tiago Sada is the chief product officer at Tools for Humanity.
It's called World app.
The primary contributor to World.
You can simply say here, you want to verify your World ID. So tap on that.
It looks like something out of an episode of Netflix's Black Mirror. And I had my doubts, but I tried it. You first have to download an app.
It'll take a picture of your face and your eyes.
Show the QR code.
So you just look at the golden dot.
Then the photo and eye scan.
All right, so it's all set. And so now here on your phone, it's telling you the orb is right now verifying your humanity.
The data is then sent to your phone. The idea is that it can be used on dating apps, video games, or when buying concert tickets, proving that it is in fact a person, not a machine.
Neuralink brain implant gives man his voice back. Is this the mark of the beast? Could Neuralink be a monitor and control tool of the second beast of Revelation? Are we witnessing prophecy unfold before our eyes?
A man who has nonverbal ALS is now able to speak on his own with his own voice thanks to advanced technology combined with artificial intelligence. The patient put a video on X that said even though the disease he has sucks, he's happy and God has answered his prayers and life is good. Now, many of you may be familiar with Neuralink or maybe not. It was started by the billionaire Elon Musk. It's an implant that helps in many areas of communication. So this brain-computer interface is implanted, and he can use it now to control the mouse and the keys on his MacBook Pro. The voice is his own. It was cloned using AI from recordings before he lost his voice. The implant showed a device, it's about the size of 5 US quarters stacked together, and once connected, the device communicates with a computer using Bluetooth. The computer does most of the processing with software. However, the client says his experience with Neuralink has been absolutely fantastic, and it has...
Next, on our final 7 years timeline, one world government.
Well, the implant is the big part. One world government. This major prophecy along our final 7-year timeline is from Revelation 13. Someone read that for us. Rise of the Antichrist in 2 Thessalonians, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come. What day are we talking about? That day. Or the day of the first. And right. Two things happen before that day. What are they? According to this verse. Yes. That's right.
The world is rapidly changing, and not for the better. Globalist elites promise peace while fueling division. Technocrats demand loyalty through digital systems. Morality is collapsing. People hate the truth. A storm is gathering, and the Bible has already told us why. The Antichrist is coming.
A new world order. Donald Trump versus the world. Donald Trump's first 100 days of his second term as U.S. president have shaken the world. But what does he have planned next?
The golden age of America begins right now.
We have an opportunity to change the fabric of our country.
Tonight, a look inside the first 100 days of the presidency.
You're gambling with World War III.
That shook the world.
They charge us, we charge them. I'd like to see Canada become our 51st state.
In the first 100 days, Trump has burned through decades of goodwill, trust, and reliance that America has built up over the years.
All hell is going to break out.
So, is the most powerful person on the planet...
No, we're not going to put up with that crap anymore.
A mastermind?
Don't get angry. Donald, don't get angry, please.
Or a madman?
I couldn't stand it!
Maybe it's a breath of fresh air that the world needs, a dose of realism.
Why massive upheaval...
$100 billion wiped off the ASX...
was always part of Donald Trump's deal.
We put ourselves in the driver's seat.
scandals in U.S. history. Who was running the White House for 4 years? He probably had, somebody said, one of the medical people said, he probably had cancer at the beginning of his presidency.
We were told that he has stage 4 terminal prostate cancer. The media is acting completely shocked, or they were at least for about 5 minutes after this news broke. But I just wanted to underscore the point here. I mean, there is a real chance that the former president of the United States, Joe Biden, had terminal cancer during his presidency, and we, the American people, were lied to about it for years by his wife, Jill Biden, by his doctors, and by his handlers. And if this is the case, if they lied about that, Chris, this would be one of the biggest political scandals in American history. And the media seems to have no questions about it. They're completely disinterested in this scandal.
Well, they've always been disinterested in the state of Joe Biden. Just to put some context around this, of course, presidents have regular medical checks, and they do an annual one where the results are made public. Now, any bloke over the age of 50 knows that's going to involve tests for prostate cancer. And yet we heard nothing about this, but it's now an advanced cancer. And this, of course, comes on top of all the revelations ex post facto about Joe Biden's mental state. So here's what President Donald Trump has been saying about that just in the last 24 hours.
There are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's two separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out that's not so.
He's absolutely right, Kristen. All these things need to be chased down. This would be scandalous if it was the other way around, of course.
Of course, yeah. It's almost impossible to believe that Biden went from a totally clean bill of health 6 months ago when we were told he was completely fit to be president to having stage 4 terminal prostate cancer today. Any expert will tell you that's a very slow-growing cancer that's easily detectable. The cancer at this point has spread to his bones and will likely eventually kill him, maybe in a few years, maybe sooner than that. But look, if he had been elected in November, there is a very significant chance that Kamala Harris likely would have been installed as president sometime in the next 4 years. And it makes you wonder if that was the plan. You know, the Democrats were going to get their first female president by doing whatever had to be done to get a dementia-ridden cancer patient in office and then just install her when he passed away. And if that's the case, if there were people who knew about this for years and lied about it, those people need to be imprisoned. We need to find out who those people are. Congress needs to, investigate this thoroughly, put everyone involved under oath, and hold the people accountable who lied to the American public about this.
How's that for a conspiracy theory?
Which doctor decided not to screen President Biden for prostate cancer, and why? Biden's not a healthy man. He had skin cancer when he was president. He broke his foot, had 2 pretty bad cases of COVID, and before he was president, he had 2 brain aneurysms. Why aren't they doing a full battery of tests on America's oldest president? Yale Dr. Howard Foreman says it's inconceivable that this wasn't caught earlier. Dr. Zeke Emanuel, a Biden guy, says Biden's had prostate cancer for years.
If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
Other doctors think the cancer could have been spreading for a decade.
The fact that we just find it at a Gleason 9 is just pretty much unheard of in this day and age of medicine. Most likely, he had prostate cancer for a long time. And I mean, usually it takes from the first diagnosis of prostate cancer to spread would take 5 to 10 years, even in the most aggressive form.
Biden's son died of brain cancer. Seems like the big guy was high risk. Why not run a test? We know they never ran a cognitive test, and now they don't run a test for cancer. Biden had more COVID tests than cancer tests. Gutfeld speculated Biden's people may have been motivated by power.
Joe's dysfunction may have been caused not by disability, but by debility, meaning he was worn down on purpose, deliberately kept feeble and weak, which made him pliable, like a POW, except the W stands for White House. Joe's dysfunction was not prevented when it could have been because it kept him easily managed.
Before we go on to the next topic. Oh, yeah, I left out something. The Biden household family doctor, I forget his name right now. He's been treating the Bidens for 10 years. He's been invited to appear before a congressional investigative committee. And then if he doesn't appear on his own, they can issue a subpoena to force him to appear. Next up, seashells in the sand. Notice that we have seashells on the left-hand part of that seaside image that spell out, first in seashells, 86, and then 47, it looks like some sort of rock that washed up on some sort of stones. Does anybody want to venture an opinion about what 8647 could mean? And when they're saying that, they're adapting a mafia term. The mafia would say that they put a hit out on somebody, or they want to 86 somebody. And the 86, I saw two different things online. It can either mean that a grave is typically 8 feet long and 6 feet deep, or it would imply that they're taking somebody 8 miles out of town and putting him 6 feet under. I heard two different interpretations of that mafia use of the term.
So those numbers, is that like a gematria thing?
Now see, James Comey, the thing of it is James Comey was FBI director, so that means he dealt with all kinds of underworld thugs, you know?
He knows all those codes.
Right. So let's go on with this latest conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it was up for like just a minute or two, and then it was taken down.
Internet is forever.
Comey belongs in jail. Deletes a post, a threat against Trump. Former FBI director Instagram post, 8647, written in seashells. Later deleting it after White House Chief of Staff accuses Comey of making a threat on Trump's life.
Did he say what he thought it meant? Said he had no idea.
The number 86 is often used as a call sign meaning to neutralize someone, while 47 refers to the 47th president, Donald Trump.
There is somewhat of a breaking news story percolating all over social media, and it all got started with a post on Instagram from former FBI Director James Comey. I want to put the post up here. It's a photo on the beach, and you can see there, this was reposted by a Trump administration official. It says 8647 in stones in the sand, and Comey posted this with the caption, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk." All right, so now this has garnered some backlash, to say the least, on social media. 47, of course, possibly a reference to President Trump as the 47th president, and 86 as well, which kind of in common parlance, it is somewhat of a numerical idiom meaning to get rid of. And so there are quite some lofty interpretations of this online that essentially James Comey was saying 86 President Trump. Are
you buying that the former FBI director didn't know what 86 Trump meant?
Absolutely not, Jesse. That is a ridiculous and insane statement to make, certainly within this context, but especially coming from a guy who's the former director of the FBI, a guy who spent most of his career prosecuting mobsters and gangsters, people who know and execute other humans and use this exact lingo of 86. Comey himself admitted in his follow-on message that he knew that this was a political statement. Well, the only reason he knew that, Jesse, was because a little over a month ago, a bunch of anti-Trump, anti-Elon Musk protesters were proliferating the use of this 8647 slogan, which was a veiled call to action to murder the sitting president of the United States.
He knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now, he wasn't very competent, but he was competent enough to know what that meant. And he did it for a reason, and he was hit so hard. Because people like me, and they like what's happening with our country. Our country has become respected again, and all this. And he's calling for the assassination of the president.
Obviously, he apologized and said he doesn't.
Well, he
wasn't
apologized
calling
because
for violence. But
look, he's a very bad.
What do you want to see happen? What do you want to see happen?
I don't want to take a position on it because that's going to be up to Pam and all of the great people. But I will say this: I think it's a terrible thing, and when you add his history to that, if he had a clean history, he doesn't. He's a dirty cop. He's a dirty cop, and if he had a clean history, I could understand if there was a leniency, but I'm going to let them make that decision.
We were walking on the beach. We went to the beach to prepare for this week, which was the launch of my book, and to think about the book and to prepare to answer questions about it. And we were walking back towards the road, and we saw in the sand someone had arranged shells with numbers. And Patrice, my wife, said, "Why would someone put an address in the sand?" And I said, "I don't know." And we stood over it, and I said, "I think it's some kind of like political message." And she said, 86, when I was a server, she did a lot of work in restaurants, meant to remove an item from the menu when you ran out of ingredients. And I said, well, to me, as a kid, it always meant to leave a place, to ditch a place. I said, that's really clever. So then she said, you should take a picture of that. And I did. And I posted it on my Instagram account and thought nothing more of it until I heard through her that people were saying it was some sort of a call for assassination, which is crazy. But I took it down. Even if I think it's crazy, I don't want to be associated with violence of any kind.
And if you believe that, I have a bridge I want to sell you. Fall of globalization. Is the world turning inward? Is globalization dying? The world is facing a dramatic shift. Rising tariffs, supply chain chaos, political unrest, economic fragmentation. The world is no longer working as one.
For over 3 decades, the world moved in one direction, toward more connection, more cooperation, more trade. Borders blurred. Shipping lanes became arteries. A factory in Malaysia built parts for a device designed in California, sold in Europe, and serviced in India. This wasn't just economics. It was an ideology, one that said the future was global, the future was shared. That ideology was called globalization. From the fall of the Berlin Wall to the birth of the internet, globalization was the dominant force shaping the modern world. It lifted billions out of poverty, made products cheaper, and linked people, governments, and businesses in ways never imagined. But in 2025, the question is no longer how far globalization can go. The question is, has it already begun to fall apart? The signs were there. They started as whispers, grumblings in towns left behind by manufacturing jobs, quiet outrage over unfair trade deals. the discomfort of cultural homogenization, and the fear that identity was being lost to a system that valued efficiency more than humanity. Then came the shocks. On COVID-19, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the US-China trade war, its supply chain collapses, energy price crises, food shortages, rising nationalism, and now, in 2025, the clearest signal of all: the return of tariffs, the resurgence of walls, the language of economic war. We're living through a moment that economists, historians, and leaders may one day call the turning point. A time when globalization stopped growing and began shrinking, and the world turned inward. Let's rewind. The 1990s were a golden age for the global economy. The Cold War had ended, capitalism had triumphed, and the internet was just beginning to knit the planet together at unprecedented speed. Supply chains spread across continents. Factories relocated to wherever labor was cheapest. The World Trade Organization was formed. New trade deals connected North America, Europe, Asia, and beyond. Companies became global. Cities became international. Borders felt like relics of a slower, older time. This was the end of history that thinkers like Francis Fukuyama predicted. A peaceful world driven by trade and technology, where every country would eventually become democratic, open, and integrated. And for a while, it worked. From 1990 to 2010, global trade soared. China's rise reshaped the global economy. America's corporations became more powerful than many nations. Europe opened its borders, and the term emerging markets became synonymous with hope. There were winners everywhere. Consumers enjoyed cheaper goods. Investors reaped massive profits. Developing countries saw growth that once seemed impossible. But underneath the surface, cracks were forming. Because while globalization created wealth, it didn't distribute it evenly. In wealthy countries, the working class felt betrayed. Manufacturing jobs disappeared. Wages stagnated, and entire regions, especially in the American Midwest and the UK's North, were hollowed out. In developing nations, industrial growth often came with environmental destruction, corruption, and exploitation. And across the globe, people began to ask, who is globalization really for? The backlash began. First in politics, with leaders who promised to take back control, close the borders, protect the worker, put the nation first. Then in policy, with tariffs, immigration restrictions, domestic subsidies, and threats to pull out of international treaties. The most symbolic moment came in 2016, when the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. But it wasn't the only one. In the US, Donald Trump was elected president on an anti-globalization platform. His trade war with China became one of the defining policies of his first term. And in 2025, back in power again, he made his boldest move yet, a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. It was the clearest message yet. The era of global free trade was ending, and a new era of strategic decoupling, economic nationalism, and regional alliances was beginning.
Explosion at fertility clinic shakes Palm Springs. Everybody heard about this? Terrorist explosion. He was a terrorist. Terrorist explosion heavily damaged a fertility clinic in the upscale California city of Palm Springs. Bombing suspects' ideology is one of the strangest ever. Anybody have a clue about what the bombing suspect's ideology is about? It's pretty bizarre.
Broken glass and debris scattered in the street out in front of several businesses, including that fertility clinic. People reported feeling the force of that blast throughout the city. Several law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and ATF, are investigating. Palm Springs mayor telling the Los Angeles Times that he could, quote, confirm it was a bomb in or near a vehicle parked at the building. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has been briefed on the situation, saying, quote, violence against a fertility clinic is unforgivable. For more,
he lived in kind of an online world. He was tied to
Pardon? It was a vehicle bomb, yes. It blew up the car, and they found his body thrown a few feet away from the car. So in the initial on-site videos, the reporters. He was in the vehicle? Yes. And he drove it up to the building and set off the bomb. But in the initial on location video reports, where the news person is standing there with a microphone over their shoulder, you can see this body draped in a sheet behind them, and they hadn't put it together yet that body was the guy who drove the car in the initial reports. Good.
He lived in kind of an online world. He was tied to a young lady that was up in the Pacific Northwest, and somehow in their discussions, this what he calls pro-mortalist, this anti-life sort of philosophy developed. She was reportedly dead or killed in a assisted suicide, and they had a pact that he was going to kill himself, and this was probably part of his self-actualization by doing this. But he was also aimed at the IVF clinic because he was anti-life, and he felt that basically anyone bringing life into this world was wrong. He felt the world was overpopulated. It's one of the strangest, I guess you could say, single-issue domestic terrorist movements I've ever seen. Pretty darn small, but in this online world, these very disparate individuals are somehow able to link up.
So you see, his philosophy was that his intent was to kill all the embryos in the facility. He didn't kill any embryos in the facility. The bomb was in the wrong location for that. However, his philosophy says that you kill the embryos so that none of them get born, and you prevent needless suffering if you kill them first. That's his philosophy. So it's not good to be born. It's not to bring life into the world, because it just makes people suffer. You ever heard that one before? It's new to me, but that's what we got going. Oh, now what? That makes me crazy. Next major prophecy, when we find the 7-year timeline summary of the stars. Trans inclusion in women's sports. The House Doge Committee what does Doge stand for again? I'm sorry. Department of Government Efficiency Committee holds a hearing on the policy of including transgender athletes in women's and girls' sports.
Executive order to ban men from playing in women's sports.
That there are only two sexes, male and female, and we are not going to tolerate biological men competing in sports or impeding in private spaces for women like myself or you.
The female fencer was given the ultimate punishment for refusing to compete against a biological man.
At the Portland Interscholastic Wheat Championships, a trans sophomore runner from McDaniel High School.
Leah Thomas pulling away over the final 150 meters. Thomas wins the NCAA championship.
Men should not be, they're hurting women. They're hurting women very badly. They're hurting women.
I was severely injured in a high school volleyball game by a transgender athlete on the opposing team.
Anyone who disobeys federal law will be either prosecuted, sued, or say goodbye to your federal funding.
I also signed an executive.
Female athletes should never be forced to compete against mentally ill biological men who parade around in women's clothes. But we'll hear from witnesses today who had to face off against biological male competitors. This led one to suffer a life-altering physical injury from a volleyball spike to her head. The other was thrown out of a recent fencing competition for refusing to compete against a man. Why is this happening when we have federal laws on the books intended to foster women's sports? Back in 1972, Congress adopted Title IX to create and protect equal athletic opportunity for girls and women in schools and colleges. Congress included similar language in legislation governing other amateur sports competitions. The law chartering the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, for instance, authorizes the Olympic Committee to recognize and empower national governing bodies to oversee individual sports on a national level. That includes determining how athletes are chosen to represent the U.S. in the Olympic Games and other international competitions. These NGBs, such as U.S.
Consumers Research goes after insurance giant's CEO for sacrificing kids to trans ideology. Sacrificing kids to trans ideology. Consumer Research claims that Nationwide is two things. It's an insurance company and it's also a hospital called Nationwide Hospital. Has been promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and pushing gender ideology on kids. Trump executive order opposes toxic gender ideology in schools.
My administration is also working to protect our children from toxic ideologies in our schools. A few years ago, January Littlejohn and her husband discovered that their daughter's school had secretly, socially transitioned their 13-year-old little girl. Teachers and administrators conspired to deceive January and her husband while encouraging her daughter to use a new name and pronouns. They, them pronoun, actually, all without telling January, who is here tonight and is now a courageous advocate against this form of child abuse. January, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Stories like this are why, shortly after taking office, I signed an executive order banning public schools from indoctrinating our children with transgender ideology.
Wow. Can you just imagine, 50% of the people did not respond in a positive way there in that room. Highest leaders in the country. Now, why didn't they respond to that? Because Proverbs chapter 2, verse 14 says that the wicked, those who are foolish, those who do not recognize God, those who oppose God, those who do not acknowledge God, leave the path of righteousness. And they rejoice at the perversion of evil. So those people that were not clapping, those who were not excited about that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean all those that were clapping were really on the board, right? But at least 50% said, we are not going to clap. We are not going to celebrate that. We are opposed to what is right and good. Mm-hmm. They celebrated when those insane laws, godless laws, were put into place.
Finally, along our final 7 years timeline, one world religion. victims of Free Palestine shooting were Jewish-Christian couple. Anybody hear about this? Anybody know that they were Messianic? Born again.
They actually worked in the embassy, I believe.
Right, they worked in the embassy in Washington, D.C.
Supposed to get married pretty soon. One was from Israel and one was from Oklahoma.
Right, he's from Israel and she's from Oklahoma.
And they were visiting the Jewish museum.
It's called the Capitol Museum. It's near the embassy. They just come out of the Capitol Museum. Messianic Israeli couple gunned down in D.C. Prime Minister Netanyahu condemned Hamas for the death of the murdered Israeli embassy diplomats who had met at a Messianic Jewish congregation. The young man had purchased a ring this week with the intention of proposing to his girlfriend next week in Jerusalem.
Last night in Washington, something horrific happened. A brutal terrorist shot in cold blood a young, beautiful couple, Yaron Lishinsky and Sarah Milgram. Yaron had just bought an engagement ring for Sarah. He was planning to give it to her in Jerusalem next week. They were planning to start a new and happy life together. Well, that tragically did not happen. Yaron and Sarah weren't the victims of a random crime. The terrorist who cruelly gunned them down did so for one reason and one reason alone. He wanted to kill Jews. And as he was taken away, he chanted, "Free Palestine." This is exactly the same chant we heard on October 7th. On that day, thousands of terrorists stormed into Israel from Gaza. They beheaded men, they raped women, they burned babies alive, they butchered 1,200 innocent people and took 251 innocent people hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. A short time afterwards, Chancellor Scholz of Germany visited Israel. And after he saw the horrors, he said to me, "These Hamas terrorists are exactly like the Nazis." He was right. And if they could get away with it, these Hamas terrorists would have slaughtered every last Jew on earth. For these neo-Nazis, Free Palestine is just today's version of Heil Hitler. They don't want a Palestinian state. They want to destroy the Jewish state. They want to annihilate the Jewish people who've been in the land of Israel for 3,500 years. I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust.
Why do you suppose we pay so much attention to what's going on in Israel, especially regarding, say, the Antichrist? When students of Bible prophecy know that Israel is God's timepiece. You look at what's going on in Israel to see how close we are to things like World War III or the beginning of the Great Tribulation period. And the more foment, the more unrest, the more chaos, the more violence there is going on with Israel, the more that accelerates, the closer we get to either World War III or the beginning of the Great Tribulation period and the one world government. Pope Leo praises Eastern liturgy, spirituality. This is one of those interfaith things that is a forerunner of the one world religion. When everybody's belief system, everyone's observances and practices is equally valuable. Pope Leo XIV met with representatives of the Eastern Catholic churches at the Vatican May 14th and encouraged them to preserve their liturgical and spiritual heritage.
Pope Leo XIV met with representatives of the Eastern Catholic Churches at the Vatican May 14th and encouraged them to preserve their liturgical and spiritual heritage.
Quanto è grande l'apporto che può darci oggi l'Oriente cristiano.
Here's part of what he said, in English anyway. The contribution that the Christian East can offer us today is immense. We have great need to recover the sense of mystery that remains alive in your liturgies, the Eastern Orthodox liturgies, that engage the human person in his or her entirety, whatever that means, that sing of the beauty of salvation and evoke a sense of wonder at how God's majesty embraces human frailty. They got all worked up. Satanic execution of children at concert planned and illegal that had been deported by Trump is now accused of planning a satanic execution of children at Lady Gaga concert.
Lady Gaga's concert in Rio de Janeiro was targeted by a bomb attack by a group of people pretending to be little monsters. Local authorities are claiming that a hate group was plotting the vocalization and radicalization of minors through self-harm and violence. The Brazilian police told CNN the suspects were recruiting participants, including minors, to carry out coordinated attacks using improvised explosives and Molotov cocktails. Even though the group claimed to be fans of Lady Gaga, investigators received a tip that revealed their plan to encourage violent behavior through extremist symbolism and coded language. An unidentified man, who is assumed to be the group's leader, was arrested for illegal possession of a firearm.
Spreading lies about the Bible. Is it really science versus the Bible? That's what Bill Nye argued in his debate with Ken Ham. Ken Ham said we need to distinguish between observational and historical science.
You want us to take your word for what's written in this ancient text to be more compelling than what we see around us. The evidence for a higher power and spirituality is, for me, separate.
He's on the side of science, I'm on the side of the Bible, therefore it's science versus religion, because he would say Christians have a religion, whereas he doesn't. He's atheistic, agnostic, so he doesn't have a religion. But everyone has a religion. Everyone has a worldview. So really it's religion versus religion, his religion versus my religion. But it's not science versus the Bible. And so the first thing that I did when I debated Bill Nye was to say we need to define our terms. If we're going to use the word science, we need to understand what science is, what it means. Because if you ask most people, they have no idea. They think of science. Well, it's isn't that, putting man on the moon, making computers, isn't that science? What about evolution? Isn't that science? They would say. But the word science itself comes from the Latin scientia, which means to know. In other words, this word science means knowledge. And what I did in the Bill Nye debate, which the secularists really hate, I divided science into two types of science. There's two types of knowledge. There's knowledge gained by observation using your five senses in the present. That builds technology, and we all agree on that science. Doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or a Christian. We agree on the wonderful science that builds technology. But then there's knowledge about the past when you weren't there, your origins. We weren't there to see the earth formed. We weren't there to see humans formed. And I illustrated this with Bill Nye by saying, You and I can go to the Grand Canyon. We can agree, here's a canyon. We can agree on how deep the canyon is. We can agree that this layer is called the Coconino Sandstone. We can agree on how thick it is. We can agree on the size of the grains. What we don't agree on is when it was laid down and how fast it took to be laid down, because we didn't see any of that. That's historical science. That's what we call it. Whereas what you observe in the present that you can repeat, that's observational science. And so we have to distinguish between historical science and observational science.
Sharia law in rural Texas? Anybody else heard about the Sharia epic 400-acre construction?
Yeah, got shut down, baby.
You did. Muslim epic city construction halted. Epic. At first, when I saw epic, I thought it had something to do with Orlando's Universal Epic new theme park, Epic Universe. But EPIC actually stands for East Plano Islamic Center, in case you didn't know. It took me, I had to look up 4 or 5 things just to find out it stands for East Plano Islamic Center.
Plus 402 acres is pretty epic.
Right.
And it's interesting that they chose a rural town to kind of take over and spread from there.
Right.
Dallas or Fort Worth, they went to a rural town.
Islamic Center claims racial profiling. The 402-acre community with plans for homes, mosque, school, community college, under intense scrutiny from state and federal officials.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced that all construction on the proposed Epic City Muslim-themed development has been halted as state and federal investigations intensify. The project, backed by the East Plano Islamic Center, EPIC, was set to span over 400 acres across Collin and Hunt counties, with plans to build over 1,000 homes, a mosque, and educational facilities.
When we lived in Plano, we were right across the street from the Plano Islamic Center, which was right next to the high school.
Yeah, what's interesting to note about what those guys said, they said, we will turn Texas, since we don't have representatives, we will make them. So basically, they're just going to have babies in oblivion, and they're going to somehow get representative government to endorse things like this that are being pushed to the side for right now.
Their overall goal is to implement Sharia law instead of American law. 40,000 Taiwan prayer groups spring up for revival and unity. War drums grow louder by day as Christians are taken to their knees by night. All across this island of Taiwan, people are meeting every day, 24 hours a day, to pray for revival, unity, repentance, and protection over their lands.
The tiny island off the mainland coast now facing almost daily Chinese military harassment. Meanwhile,
Taiwan is beefing up its military and training with new U.S. weapons.
All in preparation for potential full-scale war.
To be clear, we do not seek conflict or confrontation, but we will not flinch in the face of bullying or coercion.
While the war drums grow louder by day, Taiwan Christians are taking to their knees by night.
The united prayers and fasting prayers of the churches in Taiwan are much more than ever before. It's an unprecedented prayer movement.
All across this island, people are meeting every day, 24 hours a day, to pray for revival, unity, repentance, and protection over their land.
I believe something so simple is start having such a huge impact upon people in the church and also the people around the church.
Gordon Huang pastors one of Taiwan's most well-known congregations. His church sits atop this iconic landmark known as Taipei 101 in the heart of the capital city. He fears war with China is coming and wants Christians to be ready.
I think one thing for sure, people is going to be so shaken and people want to hear the gospel. Are you ready, or are you going to be on the run yourself?
U.S. ambassador makes history in Judea, Samaria. Someone know what the name of the U.S. ambassador from the United States to Israel, what his name is? Mike Huckabee. And Mike Huckabee says, Mike Huckabee is the first American envoy to officially visit the West Bank. And he says he praises Jewish settlers' claims to Judea, Samaria, also known as the West Bank. And he stated those who oppose Jewish settlement do not stand with God. And this is a sharp shift from previous U.S. protocol. Previous approach to Israeli settlements in the West Bank, or Judea, Samaria, was kind of ignored or allowed or not talked about much. In other words, the United States didn't have any official position about Israelis settling in Judea, Samaria. So this is a sharp turn from that. In other words, the ambassador, Mike Huckabee, is officially recognizing and approving of Israeli Jewish claims to the land of Judea, Samaria, and settlement there.
God, we thank you for this holy, sacred place where Hannah prayed, where her son came, where you dwelt among your people, and in the tabernacle they were able to meet you. And today we come to meet you as well, to express our thanks for helping us through the process in order to be here. We're grateful for the President Trump, who gave me this privilege and sent me here on this mission. And I pray I will be faithful to that mission to which he has appointed me. We pray for the hostages, those who are held captive by evil and people who have committed themselves to evil. We pray for light to shine through the darkness, and that every hostage would be released to their families and set free. We entreat you, Lord, to open up the doors of their imprisonment and let them free. We pray this here on this special holy place. Amen.
I read somewhere that Mike Huckabee, over the past 50 years, has visited Israel over 100 times.
You are my light, you're the lamp upon my feet. All the time, my Lord, I need